but we're here now, and that's what matters. You guys, I feel really reflective and just really very connected to this message today, and it's one of those kinds of messages, almost like, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. It's one of those messages because I recognize that this is not the kind of message that most of the world is preaching right now. By the end of this training, you're going to know exactly how to claim the inner king in your husband and those pieces that are preventing you from doing so. So if you want to know that, if that's important to you, if the idea of building up the man that you have united yourself to matters to you, and having him rise up with you, alongside with you, and doing powerful things together, if that all matters to you, type me in the comments. I want to hear from you. I want to see who's here, who's listening, and who has their heart, open, really open to create the marriage that you want. So yeah, put me in the comments. And if you're watching this on replay, put me in the comments if this is something that you want to know how to claim that inner king in our husband. Because let's be real, when we marry the guy, my courtship was very short. It was very short. I really thought my husband was like super perfect. Hey, Shalise. I thought my husband was perfect because we didn't date for very long. And so it was a big wake-up call to recognize how imperfect he was. What a human he was. Hi, Julie. Great. So glad you're here. Thanks for watching. No one knows better than the wife how imperfect our husbands are. Probably no one knows better than you do how imperfect your husband is. Have you ever thought about that? And yet, there's a lot of expectations in a marriage, aren't there? A lot of expectations. So, I want to share a vulnerable story with you. As I went through this journey of, really trying to see the king in my husband. There was a situation and we had a fight, and I was really putting him down. Some of the struggles that we've had in our marriage are around trust and around finances. Those have been the two big things, specifically trust with sex and then finances. And so we had a huge fight about money. And I had really, really put him down, and I had just learned some of these perspective shifts, I guess, that I really had not seen my husband. I really had, it's so funny. We're so hypocritical though. Like, we're like, oh, like I want us to be blah, 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 blah. And then we only speak like death. We only speak negative to our spouses. We're so hypocritical that way. I mean, can anyone relate with that? I'm not speaking from a place of judgment. I'm speaking from a place of experience. And so we had this fight, and I'm looking down because I have this little journal, which I'll tell you about a little bit later. I actually kind of want to read word for word. I was so angry, and I was putting him down, and then I went and I was playing a church hymn on the piano, and I really felt like my heart was touched by this hymn, and I knew I had been wrong. I knew I had spoken in ways that were not just cruel to him, but really out of integrity with myself. This was in 2017. And I softened as I was playing the piano. I was like, oh gosh, you know what? I didn't do the right thing. And here's what I said. So I went to CJ. He was in the bathroom. I have no idea what inspired me to do this, but I grabbed his hands. I fell to my knees, sobbing, apologizing, and begging his forgiveness. He tried to pull me up, but I was very pregnant. I said, I'm very pregnant. I couldn't easily get up. So he came down to the bathroom floor and held me and thanked me and kissed me. These are the kinds of experiences that I think we need if we haven't really spoken to our husbands, if we haven't really breathed life into our husbands for some time. And I probably had way more shame and crap than I needed in that moment. But that kind of humility and desire to put the marriage above all else is what saved us. It really is what saved us. What are the kinds of things that keep us stuck from really seeing our husbands as who they are? Actually seeing them as who they have the potential to be, who they are. They're a child of God, who God made them to be, whatever resonates with you, right? That higher version of them. Okay, some of the things. The first obvious one is they're not acting like it. The first obvious one is like, oh my gosh, you are being ridiculous, or you are being a jerk, or you are being chauvinistic, or you are whatever they are doing, right? That's an obvious one, and I'm actually going to speak more to that next week in our manifesting session, when our husbands really don't act like, when they have no idea who they are. How are we supposed to be? What do we do in that situation? Some other reasons are, we can get stuck seeing our husband's actions through the lens of our ex-boyfriends or husbands. So, whatever he does, we're on guard because someone hurt us once. If he wants sex, it's probably because he's lustful and just only thinking of himself. He's selfish because that's what you experienced with a previous relationship. Rhonda, I want to hear more about that. You learned about manifesting through your husband. That's awesome. Tell us more. Another reason that we don't see them is because we're stuck seeing his actions through the lens of our parents' actions toward us. So you see this all the time, right? It's like, well, my parents did this or that to me. And so, whatever, if my husband doesn't tell me all the time that he loves me, then I'm not sure if he does because of my parents. If my husband doesn't take care of me, then I'm sure he doesn't love me because my parents did take care of me. Or my parents didn't take care of me. So the only way someone can show me that they love me is by intense caretaking, right? Like, so we are seeing his actions through the lens of our parents' actions. None of this involves seeing him and seeing his actions for what they are. We're stuck seeing his actions through the lens of who he used to be, but we know he's changed. So, and I've been in this situation, we really had to recreate a whole new marriage. And it's really hard. We would both say that it was probably harder to rebuild from a place of lack of trust than it would have been to just get divorced. And that's true and not true, right? Because we didn't have to go through custody battles and all kinds of stuff that comes with divorce. But in terms of rebuilding a relationship, that's hard. It's hard when trust has been broken, whether that's because he had a secret addiction or whether that's because you know, he doesn't tell you about some of his purchases and you find him later or whatever. When trust has been broken, it can be really, really hard to rebuild that trust. And where does that, how much responsibility falls on his shoulders to change and show and prove, and how much responsibility lies on your shoulders to heal and open your heart again and do that inner work. And it can be really tricky. So often we can see our husbands through the lens of who they used to be. It's like, man, I see all these things he's doing. I think he's changed. And yet I continue to assume he's this person when he's shown me how many times that he's this person. Yeah. So my friends, I want to share a couple of things with you. You know, this is painful, right? Living like this, it's not just, this isn't even about our husbands. Like, I'm not over here telling you to do all these things because your husband deserves to be treated differently, although that may be true. I'm here telling you these things because we are not in integrity with our truth, with ourselves, when we are viewing our husbands in these ways. And we certainly can't create the marriages that we want when we're viewing our husbands these ways. There's this beautiful book called Him by Pierre-Alex Jeanty. And it's got a bunch of poems in it, and it's actually got quite a few errors in it too. If you're the kind of person who gets hung up on that, then look past it. I highly recommend this book. It's a quick read because they're poems, and it's kind of seeing into the heart of a man. And I just think we don't get this perspective often enough. Here's one poem. Do you care about what's on his mind, or are you digging out of him reasons that you should be on it? Do you care about his happiness, or do you only care to search for your happiness inside of him? Do you even care about his life, or are you making sure that you become his world and begging him to live as if you're the only thing in his universe? How can you want to always be on his mind, want him to make you happy, and only care for a life with you when you barely care enough about his existence without you? What do you guys think about that? Does that land for you guys? Because you know what? I mean, I'm an intimacy coach, and I just read this for my first time over this weekend. That hit me deep. I was like, I still do that. I still somehow think that my husband's only purpose for existing is to build me up, is to soothe my insecurities and support me and pursue me and give me safety. It's like me, and it hit me like hard. Okay, here's another one. To the boys who've had their hearts ripped out of them and their pride stomped on, you tell them, hurry up and heal so when you date you don't hurt our women. You make sure that they know that men carrying pain are storms, tornadoes, tsunamis, and volcanoes. Yet to the girls you say, Queen, if he can't love you without flaw and practice patience, then let him go. It's such a double standard that we hold them to, isn't it? I mean, do we even give them space to hurt and have feelings? It's such a double standard that we hold our men to. Here's another one. Here you are making accusations that you cannot prove, blaming him for things your friends assume and your insecurities declare. The burden of trying to prove to you that he is not the devil's firstborn or filled with bad motives is getting too heavy to carry. You can't keep putting him down and expect him to stand up for you. How does one stand up for a relationship when they are constantly being pushed down? That one's called Tired. Yeah. So, so what do we do instead? Okay, what do we do instead of putting down our men? How do we actually create these marriages? Even when our husbands aren't perfect. I used to have this friend who would say to me, this was like 6 years ago when things were the darkest with my husband, and she would say, Melissa, Jesus already born and died. You can't marry him. She would always say this to me because I was holding my husband to that standard. It was like, look, I'm not going to feel safe until you're Jesus, buddy. Because of my own brokenness and not knowing how to heal myself or stand on my own 2 feet or even find my own Jesus, you know, and rely on him. I wanted my husband to be everything for me. And we can't do that. That's beautiful. He loves me through my crazy and I love him through his. That's great. So one of the tools I want to give you is this little journal that I read out of at the beginning. This is called a love booklet. This idea actually comes from the book Fascinating Womanhood, so I'll give them their due credit. I would say this would benefit anyone at any stage. If you are full of resentment towards your husband, this will benefit you. And if you are like, no, actually we have a pretty good relationship and I just want to continue that and I want to be in full possibilities and I want to, you know, create everything that's possible for us together, then this will also benefit you, a love booklet. And what you do is you go through and you write down all the things that you admire about your husband. And if you're thinking, admire about my husband, I'm just telling you, put pen to paper and things will start to come to you. When I started this, it was 2016. Is that my first entry? 2016. And I was almost gritting my teeth through the process. I wanted to feel these things for him, but the hurt and the trust and everything that had been broken was so deep and so intense that I almost couldn't access it. It was so hard. And so I started writing. I started looking for things he was doing right, things he was doing well. And I started praying about that. I started asking God to show me who my husband really was. Oh gosh, it was so cute. And I sat down and I did a little scrapbook stuff with it and talked about what a good dad he was. And I wrote down things like he took the garbage can down to the street today. The way that he treated me when I had a toothache. I just started writing stuff about my husband, trying to just see who he was, you know. And at first it was just about how he was showing up for me to glorify me. But it became, you know, even looking at things like how it must feel to be a man, to go out in the world and try and influence your community in his job and things, how it must feel to feel this pressure to be a good father and not necessarily have a good example of what that means. How to pursue, you know, that struggle that they feel between the struggle of pursuing their career and the next benchmark in their career and taking time for the family. How it must feel to carry trauma as a man and not have any permission to show it, to show any sign of weakness or fear or insecurity. And so they stuff it through things like video games and stupid crap because they don't know how. They never were taught to love, how it must feel to not ever have been taught how to love, or that it's okay. You know, how it must have felt to grow up amongst peers who would tease you and make fun of you and call, you know, say you're whipped if you had a girlfriend, or if you had feelings for someone, or you actually showed that you have feelings for someone. Just really putting ourselves in their shoes and thinking about what it's like to be them. What are they carrying? How can we build them up? And I love, Shalise, I'm seeing your comment here about focusing on the positive. And that can be a slippery slope, right? Because if you're in a relationship where your husband is doing toxic things that are poisoning you, then focusing on the positive can actually be like taking more poison in. And so this is a slippery slope, and it's tricky. And so how do we, you know, like I said, next week I'm going to talk more about what it's like when your husband is really not showing up in his truth or your truth. But here's what I want to say to this. There is one insurance that gives you the knowing that you are taking the best steps for yourself. And it's not doing any of this for him. That's the answer. Don't do any of this for him. Do it for you. What's in integrity with you and living in your highest self, your inner queen. How would you as a queen show up in the marriage that you have? How would you walk as if every step was sacred? Because that is who you are. That is who we are. That's your insurance. And I'm going to talk more about how does a queen show up when her husband is being toxic, or her husband's not no awareness of his truth, or she's growing at this accelerated rate and he seems to be staying where he's at. We're going to talk about all that next week. But my loves, we cannot, there's this beautiful quote, and I've shared it in the Facebook group already. There is no true kingdom without a queendom. And that, the opposite of that is also true. There's no true queendom without a kingdom. So if I rise and I create this empire and I'm so full and radiant and know myself, and my husband is down in the dregs and, broken down and miserable and literally no awareness of who he is, at some point that cannot continue to coexist. It will either break or he will rise up. And if we want him to rise up, there's only one way, and that's to speak to his inner king. Okay. My sense is, let's do a quick manifesting session and then we'll wrap up today. I'd love to hear, your guys' thoughts and stuff on this. How are you going to apply this in your life? How are you going to be, you guys, probably those of you who are watching, really, I'm speaking to the choir a little bit, I think. And so what I want to ask you is, how are you going to be a beacon of light for this message to get out in the world? Like, even some simple things like no husband bashing. I just don't do that. I don't do that anymore. And that's very different than going to someone and talking about like my feelings and what's going on. And, especially if my husband is not making good choices or whatever, totally different thing. You know what I'm talking about, right? I have a clear boundary in myself. I don't do husband bashing. And if I get around people who are husband bashing, you can bet that I'm going to speak my truth on this and speak to these women's truth on this. So how can we take this information and be a beacon of light out in the world? Because if we get a bunch of strong, capable women and we leave and kick our men in the dust, leave them in the trenches, what kind of society have we created? That's not what we want. That's not what any of us want. I can't understand what our society is doing right now. But let's do a little bit of an energy thing, and I'm gonna just do a quick quick manifesting session here and tap into the energy of the group. And I want to remove the shackles from our eyes. So we're just going to remove the shackles from our eyes. Anyone who's listening to this live or on the replay, you can accept this if your energy decides you want to accept this, and you won't accept it if your energy does not want to accept or receive it. Removing the shackles from our eyes so that we can see our husbands as who they really are, and just coinciding with that, seeing ourselves as who we really are. Our sacred eyes to see, to really see. And just take a deep breath, plant that in. If you are working right now to create something amazing in your life and you want to live in full possibilities with your marriage, with your spouse, rising up in your divine feminine and creating a space where your husband can rise up in his divine masculine. I've never seen people do that alone. I have never seen people do that alone. You need support. And so reach out to me. Let's figure out what those next steps are for you in your marriage to get out of the trenches and into those full possibilities. And I'll put my link in the comments. All right, loves. Thanks so much for joining.